Welcome back to another episode of Parenting Shrink Wrap. Melissa and I are so glad you are here. We are in for an awesome episode today, and an episode that I think will pull back the curtain on a rapidly growing topic, which is trauma and treatment for trauma. We have today a therapist from Annapolis, Maryland. Her name is Kristen Keuleman. And Melissa and I are also former colleagues of Kristen, but she has since gone out on her own, and she's got a fabulous practice called Kristen Keuleman Counseling. And she's a licensed professional counselor who has experience working with adolescents, adults, and of course she does do trauma work, but also she specializes in all sorts of things, including anxiety, depression, grief, self-esteem issues, life transitions, parenting issues, family concerns, like the whole gamut. You know, she's kind of a jack of all trades, and she takes a strengths-based perspective when she's working with her clients because she wants to foster clients' natural ability to heal themselves. That's how the work gets done with more permanence. Most recently, she has started specializing in something called EMDR, which stands for Eye Movement Desensitization and Reprocessing. And we're going to talk about what that is, but it is an evidence-based trauma treatment that I recommend really frequently to my clients. I'm not trained in it, but I do understand how it works. As a midlife career changer and lifelong learner, Kristen does believe it's never too late to grow and transform. And those who work with her know that they are in good hands for doing both of those things. Kristen Keuleman, welcome to Parenting Shrink Wrapped.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here and chatting with you guys.
I know we're in for something good. Melissa and we wanted to get you on because we'd been talking about how frequently when we're working with clients, and for me, it's both parenting, like coaching clients through Teen Savvy coaching and therapy clients. And they're stuck. They get in, they are understanding skills. They're trying to apply things to their life, and they keep, it feels to them like they keep kind of stepping in the same pothole over and over and over again. And they're like, why can't I turn the wheel and drive in a different direction? And oftentimes it's because there's baggage from their past that is being brought forward to whatever the issue is, like parenting or interacting with, their boss, or trying to navigate a marriage. And it's leftover trauma stuff. And I frequently recommend looking into EMDR therapy for that type of work. So I think we'll get into a little bit more of that. Can you tell us how you got into counseling and specifically EMDR?
Well, as you said, I'm a late stage career changer. I went back to get my master's at 40 years old. So I came to counseling later, and I began my work later. And I found that I was working in the traditional sort of talk therapies that you learn in counseling school in terms of like CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, and ACT is another one. I'm very values-based, acceptance and commitment therapy. And in my working with these clients, I was finding the same thing. I was finding, okay, here we have this reframed thought. Here we have this adaptive information. And they'll say, I know it, but I can't feel it. And so you're stuck, right? And so when you're in that moment, what are you going to believe? You're going to believe your rapidly increasing heart rate, your stomach hurts, your chest feels tight. Your hands are shaking. You're not going to be able to attach to that thought. And so I thought there's got to be something else out there that can really help people calm their nervous system. And at the same time, I was looking for something, and I don't know if you guys have heard of the book by Bessel van der Kolk that's been on like the New York Times bestselling list. It's called
Body Keeps the Score, baby.
Score. I mean, it's a handbook. And I had heard of it, but I didn't really understand it. I didn't really understand that these past traumas do keep. There's something about the intense emotionality of these experiences that sort of takes you outside the window of tolerance, and it becomes stuck in your nervous system. So anything that happens currently that reminds you of being unsafe, out of control, any of those things that happened to you when you were younger, your body doesn't know the difference between that current experience or that past experience. And EMDR is a wonderful way that I can help somebody sort of go into those and process and heal from those traumatic memories. There is an 8-step protocol that I won't go into. I mean, I think it's kind of unnecessary, but there are certain tools that I think can be extraordinarily helpful to allow people to not be emotionally triggered by those memories, but rather sort of look at them more objectively. Somebody described it to me recently. It's a natural healing process. Just like our bodies heal from physical wounds, we can also heal our brains. We can also heal our bodies. So we might, actually, I just cut myself not recently gardening, right? And thankfully, I got the proper treatment, so it healed well. And now I have new skin there and it doesn't hurt as much. Well, imagine if you don't have the proper support, the proper treatment, right? It could get an infection. It could ooze. It will continue to be painful for a very long time until we can come up with the tools and the support to, heal it effectively.
I think that this is an amazing tool that I often refer patients to as well. And I think from my experience, it is a more utilized tool for trauma treatment than some other trauma modalities that are used. And more people seem to be better able to access, and reprocess in an EMDR setting than, for instance, like trauma-focused CBT, which is another evidence-based trauma treatment. But I've had people that haven't been successful in other treatments that then I've recommended EMDR, and that has been what has helped. So Kristen, have you kind of noticed something similar with kind of doing more EMDR versus previously having a CBT, ACT type background before you kind of ventured more into EMDR?
Yeah, I think so. Not everybody is cognitive. Not everybody processes in a cognitive way, using their thinking brain, right? So one of the things that I love about EMDR is when you're going through the processing, it doesn't always involve a lot of talking. Right? It doesn't involve, it used to be that the old way was like, you really have to gain insight about the trauma and you really have to talk about it. And it's true that the only way out is through, but it doesn't necessarily have to be through talking. When we're desensitizing, we could be just acknowledging images that are coming to our mind. We could be talking about what's the sensation you're feeling in your body, right? It's not always like, tell me the story of what's happening. Right.
And that's what trauma focused CBT is. And I think particularly for adolescents, that is a task that is really, really difficult for a lot of kids to kind of verbalize and get through their trauma narrative, which is a part of trauma focused CBT. They don't have to do an EMDR. And even for adults, I mean, it's pretty heavy sometimes for people to try to put words to these feelings. So that's one of the things that I love about EMDR as a trauma modality. But I also want to kind of clarify what we mean by trauma, because I think some people take a perspective of, these big, big events, like someone who's gone off to war. That's kind of like the classic, like PTSD model from years ago. I think, we all know that trauma is much more than that.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. I think the classic, early on and in how the body keeps the score, Bessel van der Kolk, really most of his research was done with veterans who'd experienced combat and sexual assault victims, right? And when we think of big T trauma, we generally think of it as these life-threatening events. And there's no doubt that that is significant trauma. But it could be that you were bullied in middle school, right? And then you develop a narrative about yourself, right? And then that makes it more challenging as an adult to engage in social situations. It could be, there's all sorts of trauma. There's complex trauma, like if you grew up in an emotionally abusive house or a house where you weren't getting your needs met, how does that impact your parenting currently, right? So I think that there's many forms of trauma, and that we sort of refer to it as big T trauma and little t trauma. And the research is showing that it's actually very effective with sort of these forms of little t trauma as well.
Before we go on about, and I want to get into how trauma does affect children and parenting. But one thing we haven't talked about is this form of therapy is called for eye movement,
Yeah.
EMDR. Like, why the heck is it called that? What does eye movement have to do with resolving trauma? Like, can you explain how it came to be known as eye movement desensitization and reprocessing?
Yeah, so in the late 80s, a psychologist named Francine Shapiro, so she was walking through the woods and she was recalling a memory, a very distressing life event. And as she was walking through the woods, she was looking from left to right at nature. And she found that as she continued, her distressing events became less. The emotional impact was less. And so she could look at the experience more objectively. Now, over the years, research has done well beyond, it's really well beyond eye movements, right? I mean, many people use that. I, as a therapist, don't, because I find it incredibly difficult to hold my arm up and have people go from left to right with their eyes. And in addition, I experienced some vertigo. There are some people it doesn't work for. So there are other forms of it. I actually sort of use these tappers that are buzzing tappers that you hold in your hand that go from left to right. And the reason it's really about this bilateral stimulation. Something that you can do at home is a butterfly hug. I don't know if you've ever done this with any of your clients, but it's just crossing your arms and creating that bilateral stimulation from left to right.
So if you're not watching this, what Kristen is doing is she's got her arms crossed across her chest, and she's got her right hand tapping her left shoulder and her left hand tapping her right shoulder, one at a time, an alternate.
And so what this does when we go into the desensitization, which is only really a portion of the protocol, but it's what everybody thinks of is the desensitization and the reprocessing. When you go into that, it creates an orienting response. So we will elicit and think about this trauma memory, and we want to bring up all the sensations involved with it, the images, what are you feeling in your body? We want to really elicit we want to activate that network in your brain. The bilateral stimulation is an orienting response. So even though you're eliciting this incredibly traumatic emotional experience, you are safe. You are in the here and now with me in the office, right? So you've got like two brains. You've got like the context that you're here, you're safe, and you're going into the memory. And the other thing that it does is that it activates your limbic system. So naturally, when you're going like this, it's
which is tapping, both like doing the butterfly hug.
Yeah, tapping your shoulders. It activates your limbic system, which brings down your heart rate, brings down your breathing, allows you to breathe at a more, instead of a rapid pace. So, a more, I can't think of the word I'm thinking of, but,
regular, right.
Regular breathing rate. And so by doing that, in that moment, your body allows you to activate and pull in more adaptive information.
The way I've described it, and I could be dead wrong on this, like I'm not trained in EMDR, but I'll tell you, I've been a client of EMDR. Like I've received EMDR and I've really benefited from it.
Yeah.
But the way I describe it is when trauma memories are formed, they're really formed not like a story. They're not formed like with a beginning, middle, and end. They're formed like flashes of sensory experiences, which is primarily right brain, emotional. And usually it's emotional overwhelm. Mm-hmm. And left brain is your like, or maybe I'm getting confused, but like is left brain's like the logical, like rational decision making. That's kind of left out off. Like, so when you bring in the bilateral stimulation, you're experiencing it as a right brain, but also you're bringing the left brain, like rational into the picture so that it gets refiled like a regular memory. It's not a delightful memory, but instead of it being like messy sensory experience, it becomes a story with the beginning, middle, and end.
That's right. That's right. It's like taking a messy pile of papers and putting them in the correct files, right? Organizing the files, right? As opposed to every time that happens, you confront this ridiculous pile of papers that you don't know how to get through and you feel so overwhelmed. And I think that's right. That's an orienting response too, being able to activate both sides of your brain.
So, we began this, I rewound because I was like, we need to talk about the eye movement thing, but we were talking about how this type of therapy can benefit parents in particular.
Yeah.
Can you talk to us about, have you worked with clients, for example, who were parents and for whom parenting was a triggering experience and that EMDR helped them?
Oh, yeah. Because what is more triggering than our children, right?
Sister.
Right? I don't think there's a parent alive who hasn't had a triggering experience with their child. And certainly that can, like I was saying, people who were raised in sort of a chaotic, emotionally abusive environment when they're younger. I mean, and then their kid is yelling at them, right? I mean, that triggers that fight or flight, that nervous system becomes extraordinarily overwhelmed, and they're unable to parent effectively in the way that they want. But it can even be more recent memories. I can even talk about my own experience in that, I was unable to breastfeed when my son was born, and that was extraordinarily traumatic for me. And so my narrative about myself became that I was a bad mom and that I was unable to satisfy my child's needs. And so I felt incredibly lost just being a parent, right? And how do I handle this baby, this child? Like, I don't know what I'm doing, right? And until I was able to sort of reconcile that and heal from that and recognize I am a good mom in so many ways. That may have been an experience that I had. I can look at that much more objectively now and say, that doesn't define me.
Right. It doesn't become you're like, I still have, if I could rewind time, I wish I could have breastfed, right? That was a priority for you. But so it doesn't become a happy memory. You're not hypnotized into thinking this is different, but it stops hijacking how you think about yourself and how it bleeds into future experiences.
Yeah.
Is that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've worked with parents who've had traumatic birth experiences, whose children are in the NICU, and then they become extraordinarily hypervigilant about their kids' safety.
Yes.
Okay? And then their kids become teenagers, and that risky behavior starts to tick up. And it's absolutely so overwhelming for that individual, the parent, and they become incredibly controlling, right? And not allowing their child to develop, obviously this is what you do, right? Like kids make mistakes. They go out and do risky things, right? And that's part of their growth.
I just saw on social media yesterday, actually, someone posted something that said every over-controlling mother was an underparented daughter.
Oh,
I was like, wow,
yes.
And then it went on to, there was like a post about like, please forgive me, teenager, for like getting all up in your business, and I'm summarizing, but like, I thought it was normal for my parents to kind of have this laissez-faire, let me just do whatever I wanted kind of thing, and that turned out I'm very independent as a result, and I'm capable, but I didn't have my emotional needs met, and so now I'm overdoing it with you. Like, that was the gist of it.
Absolutely. I think that is a direct connection. One of the things I wanted to talk about when it comes to EMDR is it's not just about desensitizing the trauma memory. It's also about reinforcing the strengths that we already have. It's called resource installation in EMDR therapy, but one of the things I do with almost all of my clients is called the calm space. So we know when our nervous system is hijacked, right? But we don't spend as much time focusing on when is it calm. Those are fleeting moments. And we want to identify those moments. What is a calm space, if you really think about it? What does your body feel like in that moment? Where is that space? And what does it feel like on your skin? What do you hear? What's the emotion that's associated with it? And we actually do the bilateral stimulation to install that so that when we go into the desensitization, there's a higher level of awareness that is another adaptive pathway that we can take, right? We know our body can be calm. And we also do that with like, if, whatever the narrative is about yourself, like if you feel I am helpless, and where you want to go is I feel, in control, or that I can manage this situation, like somebody who experiences anxiety. Well, when did you feel that way? Well, when was that moment? What is the image that comes to mind? What did that feel like in your body? What are you hearing? What are you seeing? We want to really flesh that out. And then we want to install that so that your brain is aware that is also a strong pathway to, instead of just, like you said, keep running into that pothole, right?
You know what? I remember, like I said, I've done EMDR, and this was before I knew what EMDR was. Like, I was just being treated, and I was like, okay, I'll hold those clickers. All right, if you say so. Like, okay. And the installation, like my safe place was like, I can still picture it. It's this beautiful like forest clearing. I can picture the light. I can picture the colors. Like, and sometimes when I'm stressing out and freaking out just in my personal life, not over the events that cause me to seek therapy, but like when I'm just feeling overwhelmed,
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
it's just really interesting. I don't try to, but that little like forest glen that kind of came up for me in that, like, it's installed, baby. Like, it's in there. It comes up when I'm like seeking peace in my own head, which is kind of cool. Like, lasting effects, like that therapy is years in the rearview mirror, but that's like a strong positive I've kept with me.
Yeah, that's a very strong network within you that you can continue to practice. And I do that with almost all of my clients outside of EMDR because in some ways if we install enough resources, sometimes we don't need to desensitize because they kind of get there on their own, right? When the next time it happens, they have an awareness of, I'm not helpless. I am capable. And I know what that feels like.
Yeah.
So, and I was just thinking, like, when we're talking, like, I think most people have a little T at some point in life, multiple little T's. Not everybody has like the big T, but there's little T's that happen kind of throughout life. And if you are a little bit more anxiety prone, like, it's not a big leap from, something that happened to kind of triggering this response. I think everybody kind of has it to some degree.
Yeah, I don't think really anybody comes out of life unscathed in some way.
No, I don't either.
Life is too challenging.
Can I ask a question about, so we've been talking about parents, and that, like, this is clearly a really appropriate modality for parents who find themselves chronically overwhelmed. Is this also appropriate for children or teens?
So I work with adolescents for sure. And yes, and I think in some instances, one of the examples I gave before is like, say you have a child who had been bullied in middle school or elementary school and then has severe social anxiety, right? And doesn't want to leave the house or participate in any social events, right? That's a perfect example of working on it with a teenager. I personally do not work with children. I am not trained to do that because there's an element of play that if you're trained to work with young children. But from what I understand, there has been research done and it is an effective modality with children. It's just that I don't do that. I really work with pretty much 15 plus.
Kristen, how long, if people are doing EMDR, how long are they typically in treatment? I know that that's going to vary person to person, but how long are they typically in EMDR therapy for?
So, I mean, generally, they would say, like, if you're looking at it, it would be probably like 8 to 12 sessions. But I don't really like to stick to that because it can vary so much. If you have somebody with long-standing, pervasive, complex trauma, I mean, I will spend 12 sessions just installing resources. I mean, I have clients that really can't identify a safe space, right? Because they don't know that feeling. So we really have to spend a lot of time eliciting that before we can even begin the desensitization. And then on the back end, there's also things where it's called a future template, where you actually want to, what is it that you want from this? What is your goal? Like and we don't want to just sort of do this for no reason. We want to know, how is this impacting you and how will you know it's working? Right? Is your relationship with your child better? Are you able to more effectively communicate boundaries or whatever the end goal is? And that can take a significant amount of time. So it really, I mean, I hate to put a limit on it, but I have seen people go into desensitization like that. But that tends to be, or they're able to process trauma really quickly. That tends to be the less complex trauma. The people who were, say, experienced even if it's a life-threatening experience, one experience, but they have so many other adaptive resources at other times of their life that they're aware of, that they can just incorporate very quickly.
This is really exciting. And I know from being a therapist that this is a modality in which more and more clinicians are seeking training and are getting training. This used to be like some sort of woo-woo, off the beaten trail kind of thing. And now, you can find an EMDR trained therapist with relative ease, but if you're looking for trauma treatment and we should also say, it doesn't have to be through EMDR that trauma is treated. This is not the only treatment, but it is an incredibly effective one. And to hear you talk about it, Kristen, like, there's like a warmth and an energy to the way you speak, as well as a deep respect for your clients. So if people are hearing you and hearing what we can see and know of you as your professional network here, how can they find you? How could they work with you? Tell our audience how to reach you.
I think probably the most effective way is to go to my website, which is actually www.kkcounselingservices. I was so impressed how you were able to pronounce my last name because it's not that, it can be really challenging. So I made it kkcounselingservices.com.
Yeah, because I suppose if people were trying to spell Keuleman, it would be that. There could be some missteps. Yeah.
It happens all the time. So
KK Counseling Services. Okay.
Yeah, .com. And there's a form on there where they can reach out to me, or they can certainly email. It's Kristen, Kristen, at kkcounselingservices.com.
And we'll put this in the show notes so that people can reach out to you.
Thank you.
Let's say folks aren't local to Annapolis and they are listening to this and they're like, this sounds like something that I could really benefit from. How could they find a provider near them?
So EMDRIA, which is the EMDR International Association, you can go on there and they have a listing. You can stick in your zip code and they have a listing of who's EMDR trained and certified.
So it's EMDRIA, EMDRIA?
EMDRIA, EMDRIA.
Okay. So you can do an EMDR search that way. Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, this has been, we knew it would be a treat, and I hope beneficial to our listeners. Thank you for tuning in. And of course, thank you for another episode of Parenting Shrink Wrapped. We love you. We love your kids. We'll look forward to talking to you next time. Keep raising that next generation of world changers.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining us on this wild ride called parenthood here at Parenting Shrink Wrapped. We hope today's episode gave you some useful tools and maybe even a few laughs to help you navigate the twists and turns of raising teens and kids.
Remember, parenting is a journey, not a destination. And no matter where you are on the road, we're here to help you stay on course. Whether it's monumental meltdowns, teenage turmoil, or just the everyday chaos, you don't have to travel this path alone.
So until next time, keep your seatbelt fastened, your sense of humor intact, and your eyes on the road. We'll be back soon with more compassionate conversations and practical strategies to support you and your family.
Don't forget to subscribe to Parenting Shrink Wrapped wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. And if you've enjoyed today's show, we'd love it if you'd leave us a review and share it with a friend.
If you have suggestions for topics you'd like to see us cover in the future, feel free to send us an email at parentingshrinkwrapped@gmail.com.
Until we meet again, take care and enjoy the ride.